All right, welcome. So, how addiction destroys your mindset. This video is all about addiction and the dangers of addiction, specifically on your mindset, your self-image, and your identity. I'm also going to explain how that actually keeps you stuck in the loop of addiction, and then, of course, how you can break it. So for those of you who are interested in completely transforming your lives through self-improvement, you can go ahead and click that top link in the description to book a call with me, and we'll discuss my coaching program to see if you're a good fit for it. You can also go on that second link and you can DM me on Instagram if you're more comfortable with that. So how addiction actually broke me when I thought that nothing could, right? So this is a story of a stage in my life when I truly believed that nothing could break me. Nothing could stop me on my self-improvement. Nothing could stop me on achieving my goals. And then addiction, of all things, broke me, right? Addiction, of all things, proved me wrong. Proved to me that there was something that could actually break me down, that could actually stop me in my tracks, right? I lived my whole life experiencing people, right? Circumstances, situations, even self-imposed beliefs, right? Even my own family, right? All of these different things constantly pushing me the other direction, constantly telling me, no, you can't fucking do it. You can't achieve it. You won't. It's impossible. You're not good enough. You're not strong enough. You're not determined enough, right? You're not willing enough. You're not doing enough of the right habits. You're not cutting enough of the bad things out, right? It just can't be done, right? It just can't be done, right? Even though there's other people, you're not those other people, right? All of these different beliefs, all of these different people telling me these things, all a bunch of different situations proving them right. All of it was pretty much nothing. Completely ineffective. None of it could stop me on my path. None of it could restrict me from going and achieving the goals that I had. But then the one thing that actually did break me, right? The one thing that did stop me was my own flaws, my own addictions, right? My own inability to cut out certain things was what caused me to stay stuck in this loop, right? And one of these addictions, and one that we'll probably discuss a lot within this video and other addiction videos that I have, was weed, right? Weed was one that became a very prominent addiction of mine, right? Very quickly, I started using it more than I should, but more than I had used any of the other addictions in the past, more than I had ever felt a need for any of the other addictions in the past, right? This one instantly became a constant. Right? It went from I'd never tried it before to every day to all day, every day. Very, very quickly, right? Very quickly it transitioned from doing it once to doing it all day, every day. But that addiction, with the amount of times I've tried to break it, with the amount of times I've tried to stop, and with the amount of pain and suffering that it caused to go and try and be without it, it was the only addiction that could actually break me. It was the only addiction that kept me from believing in myself, kept me from actually going out and doing self-improvement fully, right? It was the one addiction that stopped me from starting my business. It was the one addiction that stopped me from going and achieving more in my athletic career, at least up until this point, right? And yet I could not seem to break free of it. It was taking so much of the things that I truly valued away from me, yet I couldn't seem to choose those things over continuing to smoke weed. And over time, this broke my mindset down to a stage where I started to question if my goals were even really my goals, or if it was just ego, if it was just me wanting to be better than I am, right? If it was just me wanting to prove something, right? Which obviously wasn't the case, because of how many times I had tried to pursue these goals, and how many times I'd failed, and how many times I'd went back at them yet again. But I started to question if they were even the goals for me, if I could achieve them, if it was possible, right? And if I was capable. And at a point, spirituality got to me, and I started to believe that I was just supposed to experience this, that I was just meant to suffer in this way, and I was meant to continue killing myself in this way, because it was just the experience I was meant to have, and that this present experience is exactly all that we need, which is true. This present experience has and is all that we ever need. But that doesn't mean that we accept certain situations, certain scenarios. If we are doing something that is harming you or harming others around you, then you need to cut it out. And what's actually present moment about that, right? What the actual present moment experience of that is feeling the pain and the suffering associated with that, and then removing that thing that's causing that pain and suffering. In the present, removing the thing, cutting the thing out, and choosing the thing that is actually proper to our goals. So I'm just going to quickly explain what it actually takes to build a strong mindset, because then we will be able to understand how weed and how addiction uses that to break it down, right? So the first thing is belief. First, we need to set a belief, right? We need to define a belief system or a specific belief that we'd like to have, a specific version we'd like to become, or a specific goal we'd like to achieve. We essentially align a specific belief to it within our mind, and then we take repetitive aligned action to that belief. And by taking repetitive aligned action, by taking repetitive aligned action, we allow ourselves to solidify that belief into our minds, right? And so addiction uses this to break you down, by taking the belief that you have. You have this belief, you have this thing you'd like to go and achieve, right? This identity that you'd like to go and live under. But this addiction is what's driving you away from the aligned action. The addiction itself is a misaligned action. And so by continuously taking that specific action, you are taking misaligned action to your goals. And so you're breaking down the belief each time you take an action in the wrong direction. And by taking repetitive aligned action to a different reality or a different belief system, you actually strengthen and reinforce that secondary belief system. So if it's addiction, right? I was reinforcing the identity that I was a stoner and a smoker instead of the one that I was an athlete and an entrepreneur, right? Because I was taking that aligned action, even if all of my thoughts were about entrepreneurship and athleticism and sports and winning. I was teaching myself that I was a loser who sat around all day and did nothing, who didn't work, who didn't work out, who didn't train, who wasn't good at sports, who wasn't eating a healthy diet, right? Who wasn't really on top of their shit. Instead, I was allowing myself to lower my own standards and take the action that was of a lower standard than the goals that I had. And so therefore, I couldn't achieve the goals because I wasn't taking the right aligned action, right? And so the reality of living in addiction. When you are living in addiction, when you have an addiction that's constantly pulling at your attention, that's constantly pulling at your mind, that's constantly trying to pull you away from work, it's constantly trying to pull you away from the things that are truly important to you, right? This creates a negative feedback loop. And so this negative feedback loop is this negative experience of life drives you to find some type of pleasure. That pleasure is whatever habit, whatever activity that you do that is your addiction. You do that thing, and then that thing then makes your life worse. And then when your life gets worse, you take action on that thing to make it slightly better in the moment, and then doing that makes your life worse. And this constant negative feedback loop is what you're stuck in addiction. And being in addiction is just this negative feedback loop of constantly feeling the negatives associated with life, the negatives associated with life, but these negatives are created by the addiction. And then feeling that drives you to do the addiction, do the thing, whatever it is, right? Do the thing, and then by doing the thing, you make your life and your experience of life worse, right? And so this constant cycle of constantly making your life worse with the very thing that you're doing to escape how bad your life is just, it's a constant cycle, and it continues to spiral, and you continue to exponentially get worse because this is the cycle that you're stuck in, right? And there are very large limitations to your growth. And when you're living in addiction, there are very huge limitations to your growth for a multitude of reasons. One is that your brain can't prioritize the work, right? Your brain can't prioritize getting dopamine from the work because you're addicted to this other source of dopamine, this other source of pleasure and enjoyment. And you go and you seek that out instead of doing the hard work. And even if you do manage to do the hard work, you're still more focused on the addiction. And so the work doesn't actually work because you're not applying your full focus and your full attention to doing it in the moment. And so this limitation to your growth, right? Because you can only go so far when this is the case. Certain addictions literally physically limit you. Like, for example, weed stunts the growth of the brain. So, for example, the prefrontal cortex can't properly develop when you're smoking weed on a regular basis. It also damages motor function and coordination, right? So you literally physically become a worse athlete if that's your goal. So you literally limit your growth in that sense, but also in the sense that your brain is just more focused on the addiction than the work. You can't grow as much, you can't go as far, and you need to be able to fully immerse yourself into the work in order to make real progress. And you can never fully immerse yourself when you're constantly on this back and forth train of going to your addiction and then going to self-improvement, blah, 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 blah. I had a very large period of time where this was the case, where I was doing some self-improvement, but also a lot of the bad habits. And so this back and forth led me to not make much progress at all in this period of time. And so this destroys your mindset, because when you can't grow as much as you're actually supposed to, when you put in all the work but you can't actually make progress, and you do this for an extended period of time, it breaks down your belief in yourself and even in the self-improvement, right? You start to doubt the process, you start to doubt the goals you have, you start to doubt yourself, because you can't actually progress, you can't actually move forward because you're utilizing or allowing this thing to hold you back. And so you have a very negative outlook on the world because of the fact that you're in this negative feedback loop. But the thing is, this negative outlook on the world isn't reflective of the world, it's reflective of you, right? You have this negative outlook, you have this negative view of the world, of reality, of life, just living, just being. And this negative outlook actually causes you to experience more negative things. A. And B, it is a detriment to your ability to overcome this addiction, because you view everything else as bad. You view everything else as wrong. Everything else is flawed. And so without the addiction, you're just stuck in this flawed, fucked up world that nobody wants to live in. But the reality is that the world is what you make of it, right? There's a bunch of shit going on the news, right? There's war and all of this terrible things going on. I could sit here and I could pay attention to all of that, or I could sit here and pay attention to my actual reality, right? I don't watch the news for that reason, because I don't fucking care, right? I don't give a shit what is going on across the world, because none of it has anything to do with me, right? My reality, my experience, my present moment is full, complete, whole, positive. I have everything I could ever possibly need. I'm working towards and achieving my greatest goals. I have become a version of myself that is virtually unstoppable. And I get to spend my days doing self-improvement and making content on that self-improvement. So like, I get to spend my days working hard, but working hard on something valuable. So I've earned this positive outlook. I've earned this positive perspective, but also I intentionally created it, because it's such a better experience of life. If I was still addicted to something, I could sit there and think to myself, well, without this thing, I would just have more time to enjoy my life. I would just have more time to enjoy the work that I love. I would have more time to work out and train. I would have more time to learn about cool topics that are fucking interesting, instead of going to fucking college and studying math for another 4 years. And I don't want to diss math. I actually really, really like math when you get deeply into it. But the point is, you're not studying some boring topics. You're not working at some boring job. You're living the life that is fully reflective of you and the version of you that you want to be. A life that makes you truly happy. You have to be able to adopt a mindset that caters towards this, instead of that the world is this deep, dark, evil place that just you can't live in, and as a result you need to do this thing that's your addiction in order to cope, right? That makes it impossible to quit, because all you have left after you quit is that reality that you're trying to avoid, is that negative reality that you've put out, that you've consciously created for yourself, right? Nobody else in your experience is experiencing it exactly the way you have decided the world is, right? But your outlook on the world determines your experience of it. So it's important to have the right type of outlook. But with addiction, it's very hard to have a positive outlook because addiction makes things outside of it feel negative, feel painful, feel uncomfortable. And so it is difficult because partially you can't control it, but you can at the same time. You have to, right? You have to find a way to take control. I didn't break my addictions and then get on my shit. I got on my shit and then that allowed me to break my addictions. So the next and last thing is the self-imposed depression, right? The self-imposed depression is a gift that you get for indulging in your addiction for so long. This self-imposed depression is because you've told yourself that you want to achieve X goal, but then acted upon the opposite. And done this for so long that it is harder for you to achieve your goal than it was for you before you started. And this will create a sense of depression. The other thing is just living in addiction, living in this constant loop of this low state and trying to fill it with pleasures. This creates depression by itself, right? This creates a sense of believing that the world is a negative place is just due to the fact that you have taken away the part of yourself that is able to enjoy real life. Right? You have drowned it out with all of this pleasure, with all of this addiction. Right? You have damaged and harmed your brain and your reward pathway to the level that you cannot enjoy regular life and that you need the addiction in order to feel good and enjoy life. Right? And this is a shitty loop to be in, a shitty cycle to be in. You are creating this depression, right? It is self-imposed, but you are living in it because you keep taking the actions that are misaligned with the thing that you truly want. And in addiction, it's hard because you can't always really help it. It's very difficult to defeat an addiction. It's very difficult to overcome an addiction. So it is hard. It is difficult. It's not going to be easy, but you need to be able to break out of it in order to move forward. You need to be able to break out of the low point, the depression, and the negative belief system, because that is what's keeping you stuck. So how to actually get out? First step is to rebuild your mindset, like I was just saying. Start to actually rebuild your mindset even before you've broken the addiction. You have to rebuild your mindset. You have to fight that, right? You have to fight that addiction. That addiction is what's trying to break you down. Because if the addiction can break down your mindset, then you're stuck in it. And you keep indulging. And then this old version of yourself can remain, can stay alive. It doesn't have to die. It doesn't have to change. So rebuild your mindset. And how can you do this? Incorporate some of the smaller habits, right? Incorporate some meditation, incorporate some journaling, incorporate some time to just think, right? And journal about the version of you that you like to become. Write about that version of you. Write about the mindsets, right? And do it from a perspective of I am, not I want or I will, right? Do it from a perspective of I am or I have done it. Right? You can do future journaling, which is basically journaling from the perspective of your future self. So you can do this journaling and this mental work so that you can start to rebuild the mindset, right? Start to rebuild your mindset back up to a stage where it can handle the stress of the workday, that it can handle the pressure that addiction puts on you. And by rebuilding this mindset, you will create a version of yourself capable of defeating the addiction and completely removing that addiction, right? And so other ways to build your mindset are simply just doing the things that are hard, right? So like there was a period of time where I said I couldn't do a certain type of work because I was always smoking. But then I just started doing that type of work and then I stopped smoking as much because I preferred doing the work without weed. And by doing the work, I built up the mindset that, hey, I can do this regardless. I can actually like really do this. Like I'm good at this work. I'm disciplined enough to do it. I'm focused enough to be able to do it. And by doing the work, it built up my mindset to the point where I could break the addiction. So that's actually, funny enough, that's actually the next thing is do the work regardless of any outside influences, right? Literally just do the work, because doing the work will allow you to create a stronger mindset and a stronger sense of self. And the progress gives you a sense of dopamine that you can then use as your motivator to stay off the drug or the activity, whatever the addiction is. Stay away from the addiction and actually move towards something more positive. Next thing is dopamine detox. So by dopamine detoxing, right, you will actually remove all of the other dopaminergic stimulation, all of the other types of stimulation that are causing you to be in this dopamine deficit state that keeps you in addiction. By getting out of and returning back to a baseline state of dopamine, you will actually have the ability to find enjoyment in real activities again. And by doing that, you can then go and actually do those activities instead of going back to your addiction. And the more you do those activities, the more dopamine you build up. And eventually you will get to a point where your addiction is actually lower than your baseline of dopamine. And so you find enjoyment in things that are more difficult than the addiction. And so your baseline is at a level where the more difficult thing is your normal thing, and the addiction just isn't very interesting to you anymore. So that's the importance of a dopamine detox. But the difficult part of this is stopping the instant gratification is very difficult because it's an addiction in this case, right? It's very difficult to just stop. So this is where meditation and journaling will come in, because starting with meditation and journaling is fairly easy, but it will also give you the ability to teach your mind to dissolve thoughts, to be present, to be aware, and also to stay focused, as well as to dissolve the thoughts and the desires for your addiction and for the dopamine. And this will also help balance your brain out with the dopamine thing, but it will start you on the path of being able to resist the bad habits. And then journaling, of course, will give you more introspection, more observation, and more awareness of your mind and your thought patterns. And it will also help you to create a stronger mindset. So that is all I have for you guys in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you are interested in transforming your lives through self-improvement, you can go ahead and click that link in the description. And if you guys want to see more content on self-improvement, go ahead and click the subscribe button. But aside from that, that's all from me, and peace.